Hello, my name is Randall Avers, and this is the fourth and final film of the concert preparation series. Just to kind of sum up what's been happening the last couple weeks, I performed my first concert on the 3rd of February, and I've actually put out that film. It's unlisted, but if you follow this link here, you'll be able to watch it and see what sort of progress I've had since the beginning of these films. So anyways, two takeaways from that concert were that I kind of underestimated the length of some of these pieces. So the Manen piece was not 14 minutes as I thought it would be. It was actually 18 minutes, which is a positive actually, because what that means is that I have to prepare less music than what I anticipated. So that's great. Another thing that kind of got me was that I felt like my memory was shaky going into the concert. So I ended up reading everything from the score. So this actually brings us into today's topic, which is actually memorization. So there are basically 4 different types of memorization that we use when we're performing a piece of music. In no particular order, they are the visual memory, the auditory memory, the motoric movement memory, and also another category which we can call this sort of analytical memory. So visual is pretty easy. We use this a lot. When we're going through a piece of music and we're memorizing it, we're thinking about how the fingers navigate through a piece of music, how the fingers are choreographed from the very beginning to the very end. That can be our visual memory. Our auditory memory is very interesting. We're actively listening to the music, and we're adjusting the music as we're playing it, and we're also using our ears to essentially guide us into the future and prepare us for music that's coming up, in a sense. So that is our auditory memorization. Then we have our motoric memorization, which we rely heavily on in the very beginning, and that is just the movements, how we move through a piece of music. So this isn't just the fingers, but this is how the whole body moves, and even how our breathing affects our phrasing and things like that. So it's the whole body experience of going through a piece of music. And then finally there's the analytical bit, the analytical memorization. And we achieve better understanding of a piece of music if we go through the 4 elements of music as we're working on it. So when we understand how each note is placed rhythmically, harmonically, melodically, and also sound, that information makes it possible for us to retain that information better. The more information we have, the harder it will be for us to actually mess up or forget that note. The auditory and the motoric are very much the same. From the visual standpoint, what we're doing is we're taking our eyes away from the page and we're putting them somewhere. And most often that's going to be us looking at our left and right hand. In some cases, for me, actually, I think it's just very comforting just to close my eyes and just not have to sort of relearn the piece of music while looking at the left hand or the right hand. Now, the obvious benefit of looking at the left hand as you're playing the guitar is that you're going to be a lot more accurate with your shifting and also your finger placement. What we lose, though, from taking away the piece of music is we lose this blueprint of how we're going to go through a piece of music. We don't have that GPS that tells us we're located here in the piece of music, and also we don't have all that notation that's going to tell us rhythm, harmony, melody, and sound. you can't talk about this without mentioning Dr. Aaron Shearer, who was a pioneer for classical guitarists in the idea of visualization. And visualization is essentially, he would have his students close their eyes and imagine a fretboard, and they would think their way through a piece of music from beginning to end. And he would supplement that by doing solfege, which is basically saying the note names as they were visualizing them. And when you combine those two sorts of memorization, then automatically it seems like the tactile comes into play already. So that was a really excellent way to begin to memorize pieces of music, not having the guitar in your lap, but just kind of like thinking and feeling your way through it. It's actually really nice to film yourself playing, and there you can kind of objectify. You can see if there's any holes in your performance. And another thing that could also help your memory is the use of mirrors. So if you put a mirror in front of you, then you can actually sort of see how the hands work from a different perspective. You can kind of think of each of the different types of memorization as, you can sort of condense them in your head and you can think through them very quickly or so. But when we're talking about movement, movement is essentially rhythm, and this is something that you have to unpack in real time. So to improve on your ability to memorize a piece of music motorically, you actually have to take things at tempo or slower, and you have to essentially feel your way through the piece. And I'm not just talking about your fingertips or your fingers or arms or so, but I'm also talking about like your actual breathing, your posture, those things through a piece of music. As we're playing the chord or getting ready to play that chord, we need to have a conception of how that is going to sound before we actually play it. And that's something that we need to exercise. In order to improve on that, it's actually very good to go ahead and sing your scores. Take the melodies, sing through them or so, and that will build our connection between our ears, what we want to hear, and our guitar. So there are other ways to train our ears to be better. For instance, if you know your intervals very well, or can sing chords and things like that. So there are always ways to improve on that. But do not shut off your ears when you're trying to memorize a piece of music. Be an active listener. Be curious about what's going to happen next. The melody, there's the harmony, there's the rhythm, and there's the sound. And the more that we understand how that works in a piece of music, the more our analytical memory can kick into play and help support all the other types of memories that we have. One trick that I do all the time, which I think works fantastic, but it is kind of time consuming and it does kind of hurt your brain a little bit, is to actually write out the pieces by memory. So, for instance, I've been working on the Allemande by Bach. I want to memorize that, and what I do is I take a sheet of manuscript paper and I just write it out by memory. And what that does is that uncovers all the dark spots or the holes that I have in that piece of music. And it makes me think, oh, actually it isn't that, it's this. Oh, okay, well let's fix that. It may feel time consuming, but it's actually, every sort of discovery that you have actually makes you feel better in the long run. So, and then eventually, it would be fantastic to play through a piece of music where there are no analytical dark spots. Thank you so much for listening to this series, and I hope to see you at one of the concerts. All right, bye-bye.